He woke up in a white room he didn't recognize. The air was thick with antiseptic, and the steady beep of machines reminded him that he was alive, but not quite living. Tubes in his arm. A dull ache in his head. He looked around, confused, lips dry, tongue heavy. He tried to speak, but all that came out was a whisper. His name, he couldn't remember. A nurse approached with soft steps and a practiced smile. She told him he'd been in an accident. A car crash. The kind you don't walk away from unless fate decides to give you another chance. But fate doesn't always return what it takes. His memory was gone. Not just fragments or faces, everything. Then, the door opened. And there she stood. A woman with tears in her eyes and trembling hands. She ran to him, clutching his arm, calling him by a name that felt unfamiliar. Her voice cracked as she said the words. "I'm your wife." He looked at her. Searched her face. Nothing. No spark of recognition. No image. No warmth. Just a hollow, aching silence. The doctors didn't question it. She had ID, photographs, papers. She knew things about his life, things he didn't even know existed. The way he liked his coffee. The name of his childhood dog. His mother's birthday. She whispered memories into his ears, trying to anchor him to a life he could no longer feel. She showed him wedding photos. Videos. Messages. A world he was supposed to belong to. And so, he let her stay. But something didn't settle in his chest. Not suspicion, something else. A heaviness he couldn't explain. A flicker of a question he couldn't quite form. Day after day, she sat by his side. Talking. Laughing sometimes. Crying more often. And he wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that somewhere, deep in the corners of his damaged mind, she was real to him. That once upon a time, they had loved each other the way she said they had. But memory is a strange thing. It can be stolen. It can be erased. And sometimes, it can be rewritten. He didn't know if he was falling in love with her for the first time, or all over again. All he knew was that she had a sadness in her eyes that never left, even when she smiled. And the question that kept him awake at night wasn't, "Who am I?" It was, "Who is she, really?" Welcome to True Love Stories headquarters. This is the story of a man who lost his past, and the woman who claimed to be his future. His name was Alexander Shaw. 34 years old. Founder and CEO of one of the most powerful tech companies in the country. A man known for his brilliance, his ambition, and the fortress he built around himself. Interviews described him as focused. Colleagues called him intense. No scandals. No distractions. Just a man consumed by work and driven by a need to build, to conquer, to control. He lived in a penthouse overlooking the San Francisco skyline. Sleek lines. Glass walls. Everything in its place. A home that looked more like a showroom than a life. No photos. No traces of family. Just silence, broken only by the distant hum of the city and the glow of late-night coding sessions. To the outside world, Alexander had it all. Success. Power. Wealth. But inside, he lived alone. He didn't let people in. Not really. He wasn't cruel, just distant. Efficient with his words. Polite with his gestures. But guarded. Always guarded. As though every emotion cost more than he was willing to pay. And then, one rainy evening, everything changed. He was driving home. Or maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was driving away. No one really knows. But what they do know is that his car was found twisted around a concrete barrier on a bridge 2 miles from the city. Paramedics said he should have died on impact. But he didn't. He was pulled from the wreckage unconscious, with multiple injuries and severe trauma to the head. He slipped into a coma. 3 weeks passed. No visitors. No family. No one coming forward to claim him. Until she arrived. Her name was Eva Monroe. She walked into the hospital late one night. A coat soaked from the rain. Eyes red. Hands shaking as she approached the front desk. She gave his name, his birthday, his blood type. She told them she was his wife. The nurse on duty hesitated. There was no record of a spouse. No ring. No emergency contact. But Eva spoke with the kind of certainty that didn't invite questions. And when she was finally allowed in, when she stood by his bedside, she didn't cry right away. She just looked at him. Long and hard. As if trying to find the man she used to know beneath the bruises and bandages. Then, she reached out. Held his hand. Whispered something only he could hear. She stayed that night. And the next. She brought photos. Letters. Even a small playlist on his phone labeled E&F filled with songs he couldn't remember, but that somehow stirred something inside him. She spoke of their wedding in the Redwoods. Their honeymoon in Florence. The tiny apartment they lived in before his company took off. She painted pictures with words, giving him back the life he lost. And Alexander, he didn't fight it. Maybe because he was too tired. Maybe because her presence was the only thing that made the hospital feel less like a prison. Or maybe because when she sat beside him, her voice was the only sound that didn't make his head ache. But there were cracks. In the middle of the night, when she thought no one was watching, she would stand at the window, staring into the dark. She'd clutch her phone, then put it away. She'd whisper to herself. Once, she was seen in the hallway, talking to someone on the phone, her voice strained, her words fast and low. No one heard what she said. But the nurse remembered the last thing she whispered before hanging up. He can't find out, not yet. Still, she came back. Every day. Holding his hand. Smiling through the pain. Telling him stories about a life he couldn't remember. But slowly began to wish he could. He asked her questions. About their past. About himself. She answered them all with a confidence that made the doubt harder to hold on to. She knew his scars. His habits. The name of his childhood dog. She remembered his laugh, his anger, the way he used to hold her when she cried. And when he finally left the hospital, it was with her. But questions still lingered. No legal documents. No public records of their marriage. No mentions of her in press articles, interviews, or any digital footprint. And when his assistant tried to look into it, into her, there was nothing. Nothing at all. Alexander began to rebuild his life with the help of a woman who claimed to be his wife. And though every part of him wanted to believe her, some part of him remained silent. Watching. Waiting. Because sometimes, the heart remembers what the mind forgets. And somewhere deep inside him, something still didn't feel right. The weeks that followed felt like walking through fog. Alexander moved back into his penthouse, but it didn't feel like home. The towering windows, the designer furniture, the stillness, it all seemed foreign to him. He would stand in the middle of the living room, staring at the skyline, wondering what kind of man had built a life so silent, so sterile. Eva tried to fill the space with warmth. She brought in flowers. Cooked simple meals. Played soft jazz in the evening. She moved through the rooms like someone who had once belonged there, placing little reminders of their supposed life together, a framed photograph of them smiling at a beach, a ceramic mug with a chipped handle she claimed he refused to throw away, a blanket she said they used to share on cold nights. He didn't recognize any of it. But he didn't stop her. He wanted to believe. And for moments at a time, he almost did. Her voice was calming. Her touch was gentle. She would sit beside him on the couch, telling him about the little rituals they had. Saturday pancakes. Morning walks. The way he used to leave her notes on the bathroom mirror before work. He watched her when she spoke. The way her eyes softened at certain memories, the way her smile faded at others. She didn't perform her grief. She wore it quietly, like a wound she had grown used to hiding. And it was in those quiet moments that Alexander began to feel something. Not memory. Not recognition. But something deeper. A pull. A presence. He didn't know if it was love, but it was close enough to hold on to. They spent long hours talking. Sometimes about the past, his supposed past, and other times about nothing at all. She would sit cross-legged on the couch, her hair tied loosely, talking about books she loved, music she used to dance to in the kitchen. He didn't remember her dancing. But when he closed his eyes, he could almost see it. One night, she placed his hand over her heart and whispered, "This is where you live. Even if you don't remember, you're still here." He didn't respond. He just closed his eyes and listened to her heartbeat. He wanted to trust her. And yet, there were moments. Fleeting, but sharp. A name that came to him in a dream. Isabella. A melody he hummed without knowing the song. A face he couldn't place. He started keeping a notebook. Writing down the pieces that came to him. A park bench. A green dress. A rainy afternoon. None of it made sense, and he never mentioned them to Eva. He didn't want to hurt her. Not when she was the only thing anchoring him. One evening, he woke up to find her crying in the kitchen. She quickly wiped her eyes, told him she was just tired. He didn't push. But when he checked the trash the next morning, he found a letter, torn into pieces, water-stained from her tears. Only a few words were legible. "You deserve to know, before it's too late." He didn't ask. Not yet. Instead, he let himself fall into the rhythm she created. Sunday mornings with her legs draped over his, laughter over spilled coffee, quiet dinners lit by candles. And somewhere along the way, he began to feel like a husband. Not because he remembered being one, but because he wanted to be one. Still, the questions haunted him. His assistant, Marlon, remained suspicious. One day, Marlon pulled him aside and said, "Sir, I don't mean to step out of line. But I've known you for nearly a decade. You never mentioned Eva. Not once. There's no paper trail. No wedding license. Nothing." Alexander hesitated. That doesn't mean she's lying. It doesn't mean she's telling the truth, either. He wanted to dismiss it. He wanted to protect her. But the seed of doubt had already been planted. He started noticing things. How she avoided phone calls when he entered the room. How she never talked about her own family. How she flinched when he asked about their first date. One night, he found her on the balcony, staring into the night sky. Her arms wrapped around herself, her eyes distant. "Eva," he said softly, "why does it feel like there's something you're not telling me?" She didn't answer right away. Then she turned, her voice barely audible. "Because there is." Silence settled between them. Heavy. Unforgiving. "I wasn't your wife," she said. Not a whisper. Not a confession. Just a truth laid bare. You were going to marry someone else. You loved her. Deeply. But she left you. And I was the one who helped you pick up the pieces. I was there when you didn't want anyone else around. I stayed. He felt the world tilt beneath him. "So why did you say you were my wife?" "Because I didn't know how else to stay close to you," she said, her voice breaking. "After the accident, when no one came. I couldn't bear the thought of you waking up alone. You didn't remember her. You didn't remember anything. And for the first time, it felt like maybe I had a chance to be loved by you." He didn't speak. He couldn't. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't beg. She didn't plead. She simply looked at him and said, "I never lied about loving you. That's the only part one never faked." Then she left. No drama. No final kiss. Just the soft click of the door behind her. The next morning, she was gone. No number. No note. Nothing. Alexander sat in the silence she left behind. The apartment felt colder. The walls, emptier. And all at once, the weight of everything came crashing down. The love he thought he was reclaiming wasn't his to begin with. And the one person who had truly stayed, who had made him feel something again, was the one he had lost. But something else stirred in him. Not memory. Something older. Something truer. Long after she left, he found the playlist she made. The one labeled E&A. The last track was a voice memo. Her voice. Shaky. Unrehearsed. "I know I don't belong in your story. But you were the best part of mine." He listened to it again. And again. Then he stood up, grabbed his keys, and for the first time since the crash, he went looking for her. He searched for her everywhere. Not with the force of a man chasing a ghost, but with the quiet urgency of someone who had realized, far too late, what he had truly lost. Alexander hired no investigators. Told no one. This wasn't about proving something. This was about understanding. About giving her the honesty she had given him, even when it cost her everything. But she had disappeared without a trace. The apartment they had shared for weeks, every piece of her was gone. Clothes, pictures, the mug she always used, the blanket she wrapped herself in on cold mornings. As if she had never been there at all. Only the silence remained. And the voice in his head that kept repeating her final words. "You were the best part of mine." He replayed their time together with new eyes. Every smile. Every hesitation. Every time she looked at him like he was still holding her heart in his hands, even when he couldn't remember ever earning it. She had loved him not because he remembered her, but because she remembered him. She had built no fantasy. She had only stepped into a space where love had been broken, and tried to give it a second chance. And he hadn't seen it. Weeks passed. Then months. The company resumed. Meetings. Calls. Reports. The world expected him to return to the man he used to be. But he wasn't that man anymore. And he didn't want to be. His memory never came back. Not in full. Just moments. Fragments. A rainstorm. A melody. A voice calling his name in the dark. But not Eva's. It was never Eva's. And that was the ache he carried, knowing that even without his past, even without shared memories, she had still given him something real. Something rare. Love without expectation. He remembered the day he found her. He had driven out of the city, away from everything. No destination. Just the need to breathe without glass walls or flashing screens. Somewhere quiet. Honest. Human. It was a small coastal town, tucked between cliffs and sea. The kind of place where strangers still said hello and time moved slower. He walked into a bookstore. And there she was. Behind the counter, with her hair tied up, reading a worn copy of a novel he couldn't name. She looked up. Saw him. And for a moment, the entire world stopped. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just stared, as if unsure if he was real or just another dream she hadn't let go of yet. He stepped forward. Slowly. I don't remember everything, he said, his voice soft, his heart pounding. But I remember how I felt when you were with me. And that has to count for something. Her eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing. So he continued. You didn't lie to me. You loved me the way no one ever has. And he paused, breathing in the salt of the sea air just outside, I want to love you back. Not because I remember, but because I choose to. She covered her mouth, her body shaking with silent sobs. He stepped closer. I don't need our past, he said, to build a future. I just need you. And in that moment, she let herself believe it was possible. She walked around the counter and into his arms. It wasn't the passionate reunion of two lovers destined by fate. It was something quieter. More sacred. A homecoming. The kind that doesn't ask for fireworks, just forgiveness, truth, and time. They sat by the sea for hours. No promises. No grand declarations. Just two people who had been broken by life, and somehow found each other in the pieces. She told him everything. How they had met at a charity gala years ago, her a volunteer, him a reluctant guest. How they had spoken for hours that night and never saw each other again. How months later, she had seen his name in the papers. Recognized his face. Reached out through a mutual friend. They had coffee. Then silence. He had fallen in love with someone else. A woman named Isabella. A whirlwind romance that ended with a broken engagement and no explanation. And through it all, Eva had stayed quietly in the margins. Not waiting. Just existing. Living. Until the accident. Until the call. Until the man she once loved no longer remembered the woman he had chosen, and for a brief moment, she had been allowed to step into the place she had never truly occupied. She hadn't done it for power. Or comfort. She had done it because she didn't want him to wake up alone. And maybe, selfishly, because she wanted to know what it would feel like, to be loved by him, even if just for a little while. And in return, she had lost him all over again. Until now. They didn't move fast. He visited her every weekend. Learned the rhythm of her world. The bookstore. The ocean. The coffee shop where she wrote letters she never sent. She visited the city again months later. Walked beside him through the office building she had once only seen in magazines. Met Marlon. Sat in the back of boardrooms and smiled when he looked her way. Slowly, they wrote new memories. Memories no accident could erase. A winter trip to Vermont. A spontaneous dance in the middle of a street market. A night on the rooftop, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars. And one quiet spring evening, he knelt down on one knee, not because it was tradition, not because it was expected, but because it was time. He held her hand and simply said, this time, I remember. And I choose you. She didn't cry. She just said yes. Because in the end, love isn't about what we remember. It's about who stays when everything else is gone. And she had stayed. From beginning to end. She had stayed. This was the story of a man who lost everything, and a woman who gave everything to remind him how to feel again. It wasn't about memory. It was about love. Real. Patient. Enduring. The kind that finds its way home. No matter how far it has to travel. If this story touched you, like, share, and subscribe to True Love Tales for more. We bring you the stories that remind you what the heart is truly capable of. Tell us your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.